One New York building sold enough in 2 weeks to bend a market known for not budging. And just outside the city, nearly 11,000 buyers chased barely 7,300 sellers. This is the split screen of New York real estate right now, a luxury engine roaring on the Upper East Side, a seller's fever on Long Island, and a downtown ledger that still winces when it sees the word office. The stakes are high, the numbers are sharp, and the next moves are already on the calendar. Start with the heartbeat. In Manhattan, one address on Madison Avenue took center stage in January. After releasing its floor plans on January 15, a single luxury condo building at 1122 Madison Avenue went into contract on 9 units over the next 2 weeks. Manhattan's luxury residential sales for the month totaled $885,663,000. Roughly 10% of that total tied back to this one building, 1 block from Central Park, 30 seconds from a change in tone. Inside, there are 26 residences spread across 22 floors, designed by Studio Sofield, complete with a fitness center to keep the lights on and the buyers happy. Since launching sales, the owners raised prices 3 times. That decision didn't chase people away. It concentrated attention. On the Upper East Side that same week, 14 sales closed above $4 million, 4 co-ops, 8 condos, 2 townhouses, an inventory list that reads like a roll call for old money and new money shaking hands. Look at the top 5 contracts in that building alone. 1. Priced at $22,950,000 for 5 bedrooms and 5.5 baths across 4,346 square feet. Another at $14,325,000, 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, 3,178 square feet. A third at $12,925,000 for 4 bedrooms and 4.5 baths in 3,178 square feet. The next at $12,225,000 with 3 bedrooms and 3.5 baths across 2,765 square feet. And another at $11,825,000 back to 4 bedrooms and 4.5 baths in 3,178 square feet. Between East 83rd Street and East 84th Street, the numbers did the talking and the market listened. Now widen the lens to the island east of the East River. Long Island finished 2025 as the strongest sellers market in the country. December marked the 3rd consecutive month with that title. The math there is stark. The region had 33.4% fewer home sellers than buyers. Nearly 11,000 buyers hunted listings across the Nassau County metro area, which includes both Nassau and Suffolk counties, while just over 7,300 sellers stood on the other side of the table. By definition, you hit a seller's market when buyers outnumber sellers by more than 10%. Long Island didn't just cross that line. It lapped it. Inside that pressure cooker, certain neighborhoods glowed hotter. On the North Shore, towns like Roslyn Heights, Old Westbury, and Brookville saw particularly active segments in the $2 million to $4 million range. Low inventory kept the competition fierce, even as the frenzy of 2021 faded into a more deliberate pace. Prices responded. Valuations rose. That's a victory for sellers and a signal for higher property taxes to come for those staying put. Set that against the national backdrop, where the tide pulled in the other direction in December. Across the country, there were 47% more home sellers than buyers that month, one of the lowest buyer levels on record outside the early pandemic freeze. In Austin, Texas, there were an estimated 128% more sellers than buyers. Long Island didn't just buck a trend. It defied a national imbalance by tens of percentage points. Back in the 5 boroughs, a different stress test is coming with a date and a name. A New York-focused real estate operator with apartments in Manhattan and Brooklyn and a commercial portfolio stretched across the city will release its 4th quarter 2025 results on February 13, 2026. All eyes are on 2 lines on that ledger: occupancy rates and debt management. Lease renewals coming due, financing costs rising or stabilizing, and the ability to modify loans, especially for Brooklyn assets, will tell you how much elasticity is left in a balance sheet heavy with both residential strength and office headaches. This is the divergence that defines the city today. The multifamily side in Manhattan and Brooklyn is sturdy. The office side is not. The bridge between them is financing cost. In a rate environment that still asks more from every dollar borrowed, specialized operators live or die by what they can roll, what they can refinance, and what they can occupy. That's why this earnings release isn't just a quarterly check-in. It's a barometer for how a New York portfolio handles the year ahead when residential demand is high, but office recovery is still a long walk. So why is all this happening at the same time? Start with the price of money. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate recently hovered between 6.10% and 6.375%. The 15-year fixed slid lower, between 5.25% and 5.818%. When rates live above 6, buyers do math differently. Some stretch, some pivot to renting, some wait. Economists looking toward 2026 expect mortgage rates to hold above 6%, and they expect U.S. home values to grow 1.2% after a flat 2025. They also see existing home sales climbing to 4.26 million in 2026, a 4.3% increase from this year's projected total. That's not a boom. It's a slow thaw. In the tight corridors of New York, the difference between a freeze and a thaw is felt in days, prices, and people. On the construction side, single-family home starts were trending 5% below last year's pace as of August. If that pace slips another 2% in 2026, starts would fall below roughly 947,000 homes, the low water mark hit in 2023 since the start of the pandemic. Builders are expected to lean hard on rate buydowns and other incentives to move existing inventory rather than breaking new ground. For buyers who want new in or near New York, the pipeline matters. When fewer homes begin, fewer homes complete, and choices narrow before the first foundation sets. The rental market, meanwhile, is writing its own chapter. Across most of the country, rent affordability has been improving. As of October, a median income household would spend 27.2% of income on the typical U.S. rent. Multifamily rents are forecast to rise just 0.3% in 2026, while single-family rents are projected to climb 2.3% as many would-be buyers delay purchases. But New York City is a notable exception. Rent growth here is expected to accelerate next year, bucking the national trend. The buildings that adjust, adding communal spaces and family-friendly features, will be better positioned in 2200 to meet the tenants who choose renting as a lifestyle rather than a way station. That choice is shaping up to be a powerful force. Nearly 3 in 5 renters plan to keep renting next year. Even if mortgage rates fell from today's levels, only 37% say they would buy, down from 45% last year. And the profile of renters is changing. 37% now have a child younger than 18 at home. In a city where rent is expected to run hotter next year, those families will bring new expectations to the buildings they live in and the neighborhoods they choose. Inside the city's luxury corridors, the math moved faster. If you zoom back to Madison Avenue for a moment, buyers were willing to sign for 8 figures as prices rose 3 separate times after sales launched. That's not a fluke. It's a signal that certain Manhattan blocks can outrun macro drag as long as the product feels singular. 26 condos across 22 floors, tailored design, a block from Central Park, and contracts flowing 9 deep in 2 weeks. Those are the ingredients of a micro-boom that shows up as 10% of Manhattan's luxury volume in a single month. On Long Island, the ingredients look different, but the oven is just as hot. With nearly 11,000 buyers circling barely over 7,000, 300 sellers in December, and a 33.4% gap between the two sides, you get bidding pressure and patience wearing thin. That dynamic held for 3 straight months at the end of the year. In North Shore enclaves like Roslyn and Brookville, the $2 million to $4 million bracket saw the most foot traffic and the most offers. It's not just buyers from the city. It's also local families who want schools that consistently rank near the top and a commute they can live with. Contrast that with national conditions to understand how out of sync Long Island is by design right now. In December, across the United States, there were 47% more home sellers than buyers. Austin tallied a 128% surplus of sellers over buyers. Markets like that lean toward concessions, days on market creeping up, and prices softening. Long Island, by the definition that marks a seller's market when buyers outnumber sellers by more than 10%, lived 3 times past the threshold. The policy environment adds another layer of uncertainty. A new policy note says that, effective March 1, green card holders will not be allowed to apply for Small Business Administration loans. This follows a move last year that tightened the ownership requirements for SBA-backed borrowing, raising the bar so that businesses applying for loans needed to be 100% owned by U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, or lawful permanent residents, up from a 51% standard. The agency doesn't typically lend directly, except when disasters strike, but it works with lenders to distribute capital. Signals suggest that a rule change like this could tighten credit channels for small firms that operate around housing, from property services to trades, at least at the margins. The players inside New York are adjusting. One high-profile brokerage headquartered in the city is expanding to Boston with a team of founding agents: Michael L. Carucci, Antonio Curi, Jorge Siriego, Kyle Farrell, and Joe Albano, testing its model in a market where the median home price sits around $830,000. Take the juxtaposition: an expansion during a period when the 30-year mortgage holds between 6.10% and 6.375%, and the 15-year sits between 5.25% and 5.818%. It's a reminder that while New York's story is about blocks and trains and parks and schools, it's also about companies making bets across state lines when momentum gathers at home. Momentum is the word in Manhattan's rental and condo towers. Head downtown, and you'll find owners of mixed portfolios grappling with the divergence between full apartment buildings and half-full offices. The commercial office picture remains difficult. Lease renewals get scrutinized one by one. Occupancy rates become the report card a lender looks at before approving a modification. Financing costs, whether they stabilize or drift higher, set the tone for what stays on the books and what gets repositioned. Any hint of successful loan modifications, especially in Brooklyn assets, will be read as a positive signal for liquidity and balance sheet stability in the months ahead. The broader real estate investment trust landscape isn't collapsing. It's showing gradual signs of stabilization. But New York's specialization means that even small cracks in the office facade feel large. That's why the February 13, 2026 earnings release matters. In a city where residential demand in Manhattan and Brooklyn stays high, the core question is whether those rents, those occupancies, those wait lists can carry the weight of an office side that still needs time to find its footing. Take the family eye view of the rental side. With 37% of renters now living with a child younger than 18, and rent growth in New York City expected to accelerate next year instead of cool, the amenities mix shifts. Communal spaces, homework pods, play nooks, flexible rooms move from fringe to front page. In a market where nearly 3 in 5 renters intend to stay renters into next year, buildings that feel more like neighborhoods have the edge. That's not guesswork. It's a response to data about who is renting and how long they plan to do it. On Long Island, that edge belongs to sellers for now. The math that made it the strongest sellers market in the country at the end of 2025 did not rely on a single-town fluke. It spanned the Nassau County metro area across both Nassau and Suffolk counties. Nearly 11,000 buyers, just over 7,000, 300 sellers, a 33.4% shortage on the selling side, and 3 months running with that same crown. When supply sits that far below demand, prices move up and bidding spreads widen. The knock-on effect is a property tax bill that runs higher the next year, and the next, until valuations stabilize. Meanwhile, for buyers in the city looking at the Upper East Side, the calculus is different, but equally clear. If the top of the market can absorb a $22,950,000 contract at 4,346 square feet, and the same building can stack 14,325,000, 12,925,000, 12,225,000, and $11,825,000 deals on top within days, then the narrative that luxury has softened falls apart on contact with Madison Avenue. One building, accounting for roughly 10% of the borough's luxury volume in a whole month, is a sign that supply tailored well sells fast, even as financing stays expensive. The national temperature matters here because it tells you what is unique and what is not. Economists are looking for a modest national rise in home values of 1.2% in 2026 and a slight uptick in transactions to 4.26 million existing home sales. Mortgage rates, in that view, are unlikely to fall below 6% next year. Offer that to a city with rent growth set to accelerate and the suburb that can't list enough, and you get a pipeline where more families choose to rent a little longer, more sellers test higher prices, and more builders slow roll starts. As of August, those single-family starts were already 5% below last year. A further 2% drop in 2,200 would place starts below roughly 947,000 homes, capping what new inventory flows into the for-sale side just as more buyers try to re-enter. Inside the transaction, another change is coming. In 2026, the role of artificial intelligence is expected to move beyond basic advice. The technology will begin coordinating steps in buying, selling, and renting, connecting people with agents, setting up tours, nudging negotiations, and teeing up closing prep. That sounds abstract until it shortens the time between decision and action. In a market where rates hold above 6% and rents rise faster in New York than elsewhere, a frictionless process becomes a competitive advantage for those ready to move. A city like New York is always a collage of micro-markets. The Upper East Side's tower by the park. Brooklyn blocks where the waiting list for a two-bedroom is longer than the block itself. Long Island cul-de-sacs where a new sign on a Saturday morning draws 3 offers by Sunday night. Underneath those scenes, numbers draw the outlines. 9 contracts in 2 weeks at one building after floor plans hit on January 15th. 14 luxury closings north of $4 million in one neighborhood in 1 week. $885,663,000 in luxury sales across Manhattan in 1 month, with a 10% slice held by a single address. Nearly 11,000 buyers pressing against just over 7,300 sellers across the Nassau and Suffolk County Metro in December. These are not generalities. They are coordinates. So what happens next? For the city's mixed portfolios, February 13, 2026 will bring clarity. Occupancy rates and debt management will tell a story about resilience or risk. Pending lease renewals in the office bucket will give you a read on how fast that side can mend. Any successful loan modifications, especially in Brooklyn, will look like a relief valve being opened. If residential strength in Manhattan and Brooklyn continues to run hot, it can offset some commercial strain. The question is how much and for how long in a rate environment that still asks for 6.10% to 6.375% on a 30-year note and 5.25% to 5.818% on a 15-year. For Long Island, the base case is a seller's market that stays tight into the first half of 2026. That's what the numbers imply after 3 consecutive months at the top and a 33.4% gap between buyers and sellers in December. If mortgage costs ease even modestly within the band they're expected to hold, more buyers could step forward, not fewer. Without a surge of new listings, that means continued competition in the $2 million to $4 million tier in towns such as Roslyn, Roseland Heights, Old Westbury, and Brookville, with valuations and property tax implications following. For renters in New York City, the forecast is the opposite of relief. As multifamily rents nationwide are projected to rise only 0.3% next year, and single-family rents by 2.3%, New York City is expected to see rent growth accelerate, with a median income household nationally spending 27.2% of income on the typical rent as of October. The bar here is likely to be higher. In a market where nearly 3 in 5 renters plan to stay put in renting and only 37% would buy even if rates fell, demand stays thick even as affordability tightens. Zoom out to the nation on construction. If single-family starts remain 5% below last year's pace and slip another 2% in 2026 to under roughly 947,000, the pressure on available for-sale inventory persists. Builders will push incentives, rate buy-downs and the like, to move standing stock. That can help some buyers now, especially in metros where inventory sits. In New York and its suburbs, where lots are scarce and approvals are complex, it means the resale market continues to carry the load. On the regulatory side, the watch item sits on March 1. a change that blocks green card holders from applying for SBA loans after last year's move to tighten ownership requirements from 51% to a full 100% by citizens, nationals, or lawful permanent residents, is a sign of tightening in one channel of small business credit. Signals suggest that the ripple could brush industries adjacent to housing, think contractors and service firms, even if the direct line to mortgages is thin. The SBA generally does not lend directly, except during disasters, but it's a conduit that amplifies what private lenders can or cannot do. Meanwhile, the luxury North Star on Madison Avenue isn't just a headline number in a spreadsheet. It's a fast-moving, high-dollar signal that well-placed, well-designed, scarce product can command higher prices even after 3 hikes in a short window. When one building can hold 10% of Manhattan's luxury volume in a 31-day month, it tells developers and lenders what penciled pro formas can look like if everything lines up: location within a block of Central Park, 26 residences with tailored layouts, and the timing of a floor plan release on January 15 that catalyzed 9 contracts in 14 days. Put the strands together. New York's story heading into 2026 is not a single arc, it's a double helix. On one strand, apartments in Manhattan and Brooklyn keep buildings full and waiting lists in motion, and the Upper East Side's new crown jewel pulls in contracts that start at 8 figures and reach to $22,950,000 for 4,346 square feet. On the other strand, offices remain a problem set that a single quarter won't solve, leaving occupancy rates and financing costs as the variables that matter most to a city-heavy balance sheet. In the suburbs, Long Island's market favors sellers by a 33.4% margin at year-end, with nearly 11,000 buyers pushing against just over 7,300 sellers, and the third straight month wearing that strongest sellers market banner. The country around it offers a steady but unspectacular baseline. Home values expected to rise 1.2% next year. 4.26 million existing home sales on deck, a 4.3% lift. Mortgage rates unlikely to fall below 6%. Single-family starts that may skid another 2% after a 5% lag, pushing below roughly 947,000 and keeping the new home conveyor belt slow. Multifamily rents moving up just 0.3% nationally, while single-family rents post a 2.3% gain. And then that New York exception, rents here running hotter, not cooler, with communal spaces in buildings shifting from amenity to expectation. Here's the base case. Into mid-2026, expect a warm but not scalding market. In Manhattan and Brooklyn, residential strength persists. Luxury remains selective but strong in pockets like the Upper East Side's 1,102 Madison Avenue, where 9 contracts in 2 weeks after a January 15 catalyst and top 5 deals, ranging from $11,800,000 and $205,000 to $202,950,000 hint at deep targeted demand. On Long Island, sellers hold the upper hand through spring, with the December gap of 33.4% fewer sellers than buyers, and nearly 11,000 buyers crowding over 7,300 listings, suggesting that any mortgage rate dips within the 6.10 to 6.375% band for 30-year loans will bring more bids, not fewer. For rentals in New York City, brace for acceleration in rent growth while national averages cool, with a tenant base where nearly 3 in 5 plan to keep renting, and only 37% would buy even if borrowing costs eased. Now, 2 things to watch. First, February 13, 2026. Occupancy rates and debt management updates from a New York-centric portfolio will act as a pulse check on how well residential strength in Manhattan and Brooklyn can offset the structural weaknesses in offices. Signs of successful loan modifications, particularly tied to Brooklyn assets, and a clear handle on pending lease renewals will be the tells for future liquidity. Second, March 1, a change in SBA eligibility that excludes green card holders after last year's shift to 100% citizen, national, or lawful permanent resident ownership from a 51% bar may not hit mortgages directly, but signals suggest it could narrow financing lanes for the small businesses that keep housing humming. Layer that over single-family starts trending 5% down as of August and a potential further 2% drop in 2,200, and you have a supply side still unwilling to sprint. In a city where one building can count for 10% of Manhattan's luxury volume in a month, and a suburb can clock 3 straight months as the nation's strongest sellers market, the message is simple. Watch the numbers, block by block, and month by month. They will tell you where New York is heading before the skyline ever changes. If you want more grounded, number-driven looks at New York's housing story as it unfolds, stick with us and subscribe for the next chapter.